Hello everybody and welcome back to Sweet and Sour Soccer, and we're back for another week of Premier League predictions. Already got game week 14 now. Guys, for those that are keeping up with mine and James's week-to-week head-to-head predictions, we both had a bit of a rubbish week last week, only scoring 3 points out of the possible 30 available, which also does mean that James keeps his 15-point lead too. So I'm going to have to try and have a really good one this one and try and close that gap. So let's get straight into these. Let's waste no more time. And let's start off with Arsenal, who take on Wolves. And of course, this is going to be a Wolves team that are going to be very fired up after some controversial decisions which happened on Monday night's game against Fulham. But it's also going to be a very weakened Wolves. Both João Gomez and Mario Lemina, the core, the spine of that central midfield partnership, are both out through suspension. I think that's going to be a massive loss for Wolves. Arsenal, on the other hand, they managed to get the win against Brentford in the last games week, but it did not convincing. But it did mean that obviously Ramsdale got himself a clean sheet. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Will he automatically get replaced back when now Sanchez is available for selection? And also possibly a huge moment for Kai Havertz as well, getting the winner. And obviously, you know, he's not had the best start to his career and life at Arsenal, but I'm sure that will be a huge moment for him. I think when you look at the missing partnership that Wolves have in central midfield, and especially with Arsenal being the home team, even as a Wolves fan, I can only see this going one way. I'm going to give it to Arsenal. And you know what? I'm actually going to go with quite convincing 3-0 Arsenal win in this one. Let's move on to speaking about Brentford next, who take on Luton Town. And it feels like if one of the newly promoted teams were going to stay up this season, it looks most likely that it's going to be Luton. You know, they're maybe not the most technical gifted team. They've maybe not been able to spend that much money compared to some of the teams in the Premier League. You know, they've not spent multiple millions. They mainly have the, you know, one of the smallest grounds in the Premier League. But what they are doing is giving a real fight. And of course, a big win against Crystal Palace does mean that, you know, they stay clear of the bottom three, and they will do so even if they lose this game's week. It's going to be a difficult game, though, to take on a Brentford team, which, as we know, are a very good team at home. They've definitely got some talent. They've got some goals in them. And I think with them, especially having that home advantage, they will get the result. So I'm actually going to go Brentford 3, Luton 1 in this game. Let's move on, speaking about two of the other teams that are sitting near the bottom of the table, and that is Burnley, who take on Sheffield United. Of course, only a point separates these two teams. And as we go into game week 14, they've only actually managed 4-5 points respectively. This is going to be a really interesting one because I'll be interested to see if whoever comes out on the losing side of this, could we see a manager sacking? I've been saying that I'm really shocked that we've not seen many sackings this season. You know, we're already into the depths of December come this game week when it starts and takes place. And I don't think we've seen a manager sacking yet, have we? We've obviously seen a manager step down before the season starts, but off the top of my head, I can't think of a managerial sacking. Usually by this point in the season, there's been maybe 5, 6, even more. And you do wonder, whoever loses this, could this be the end for them? I think it's probably more likely if Sheffield United lose than it is if Burnley lose. But one thing that does remain is I think both teams desperately need the 3 points in this one. Unfortunately, I'm not going to give either of them the win. I'm actually going to go for a 1-1 draw in this one. I think the points will be shared. Hi guys, just a quick one before we get back to the video. We had over 1,700 people watch last week's predictions, and the main reason for that was down to you guys. You helped us out, you hit that like button, you got your comments in, and also we got to welcome quite a few new subscribers as well, in fact over 40. So I want to ask the same again. If you can help out by hitting that like button, commenting, and also subscribing if you're new here, it really does help us out so much. But let's get back to these Premier League predictions. Let's move on to speaking about Nottingham Forest to take on Everton. And it's really interesting looking at both these teams now at the moment, because Nottingham Forest started the season very well, seemed to have a lot of excitement going around them. They were scoring goals. You know, our Nui at the time was in such fine form as well. But they've spent quite a long time not really getting many wins. Is it one win in the last 8 or 9 now? Is it really that grim? I think it is. And, you know, that fortress of Nottingham Forest at home, just hasn't been that much as a fortress, has it, as the season's gone on? But they've got a real chance to make it a fortress against an Everton team who obviously had that massive points deduction. The protests were there, protesting against the corruption within the Premier League from the fans, but that didn't help them against Manchester United. It was a heavy defeat in the end, and you do just wonder how demotivated are these players, and what task has Sean Dyche got to really get these players motivated and back fighting, and obviously just getting them back out of the relegation zone. I think they will come with some fight, but I just have a feeling Forest are going to edge this, especially just because of the home team. I would have gone 2-1 either way, depending on whoever the home team was, and because it's Forest, my score is 2-1 to Forest. Guys, just a quick one. I will put James's scores on at the end of the video for you all to see as well. But let's move on to my prediction for Newcastle, who take on Manchester United. And again, another really interesting game because Newcastle heavily impressive against Chelsea. You know, Anthony Gordon, obviously looking a really good player for them. He just seems to be doing really good in really different roles. Let's just keep it simple. Different roles. You know, going out on the wing at times, playing almost as a number 10 at times. He really is adapting his game, and he's really building some confidence and really just getting better as a player as well, especially since joining Newcastle and cementing that position within the starting lineup. But Newcastle, they take on a team with Manchester United that probably feel a bit more rejuvenated. You know, it's a Manchester United team that have got a big win now and will probably be looking to really push on and do some major damage and climb up the table. But let's be honest, it's not going to be easy against Newcastle United. And of course, Newcastle do have the benefit that they are playing on Tuesday night. So I feel they'll be well rested. I don't think the fact that they're playing European football will come into it too much either. I am going to go with Newcastle. I'm going to go with Newcastle. I think they get the job done, especially at St. James's. I'm going to go 3-1 to Newcastle. Let's move on, speaking about Bournemouth now, who take on Aston Villa. And Bournemouth, one of those teams that we've got to start keeping a little bit of an eye on, actually, because they've come into some impressive form. They've won 3 of their last 4 games now. And Bournemouth fans at the time, they were telling us, stick with, look, Ola doesn't look like he's having a really good start to the season, but the football is better than what we had under Gary O'Neill last season. And eventually the Bournemouth fans did feel that these results were going to come, and now they are. So they're probably thankful that they did stick with their manager, and he's starting to, really bring this team into doing something. And I'm sure Bournemouth will feel quite comfortable now of, being able to maybe get a bit of a gap between them and the bottom 3. But it's not going to be an easy task because they take on an Aston Villa team that are on very, very fine form. We spoke about before how good their record has been at home, but they're also now starting to bring that record away from home as well. And they're looking like real challengers for those European places. And you could argue even those Champions League places now, because we're 14 games into the season. You can't just say this isn't a team that doesn't belong there anymore. They've been consistent throughout the season. And even as a Wolves fan, I can say this Villa team looks absolutely fantastic. And I think for that reason, they are going to have enough to get past Bournemouth. And I'm actually going to go for another 3-1 scoreline. So Aston Villa 3, Bournemouth 1. Let's move on now to speaking about Chelsea, who take on Brighton. And the only thing I can really predict in this one, and to be honest, now it probably won't happen, is I reckon there's going to be goals. I fancy a high scoreline in this one. I think both teams have it in them to be able to get the win. Both teams at times have shown that they can be a really good team, but I've also had moments of inconsistency. Of course, it was Brighton that managed to get the win at the weekend, and Chelsea a heavy defeat to Newcastle. But we have seen some good, especially before the international break, just before, some good points from Chelsea that really you would have thought they might have expanded on and brought into, life after the international break. I think this could honestly go either way, especially with it being at Stamford Bridge. So I'm going to call it a high-scoring draw. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw in this one. I think both teams will concede a couple, but both teams will score a couple as well. Next up, we have Liverpool, who take on Fulham. And look, Fulham, they got the win against Wolves. It was very controversial. People have been speaking about it. Not just myself as Wolves fans, when I was tuning in to Talk Sport. Like, lots of people were giving their opinion about it, talking about how it was a little bit unfair on Wolves. But Fulham got the win. They did the job. And, to be fair to them, they did score 3 goals. I don't think either team played very well. And they come up against the Liverpool team that, for me, I think are just going to have too much for Fulham. I really do. So, look, I'm just going to give my score straight away. Liverpool 3, Fulham 0 in this one. I don't see Liverpool having any problems, in all honesty. Let's move on talking about West Ham next, who take on Crystal Palace. And probably Crystal Palace team, which will be licking the wounds a little bit. They probably will be quite disappointed that they didn't manage to come away with at least a point against Luton. And in all honesty, they probably expected to get 3 points from that game. But of course they didn't, and they were beaten. So it'll be interesting to see if they come up against West Ham with a bit of fight and really trying to get something. Of course, West Ham, they showed a bit of fight at the weekend as well. They were spent the majority of the game 1-0 down against Burnley, but did manage to overturn it. But it's worth mentioning part of it did come through an own goal in the 86th minute. And then, of course, they then managed to come on and get a very late winner. Still some questions around West Ham, because I feel they should be doing much more than what they are doing. And I do feel that pressure could mount on David Moyes. I think this is going to be a hard one to call. I'm actually going to go for another draw. I'm going to back a draw here. I'm going to go West Ham 1, Crystal Palace 1, both teams to score in this one. And then I believe this is the last one to finish off the day. We've got Man City, who will take on Spurs. It will be the Super Sunday game. And a few weeks ago, you'd say this is a really tough one to call, because Spurs were in the form of their life. They were doing absolutely fantastic. And then obviously the injuries happened, suspensions happened, the loss of James Maddison, and suddenly they've come, well, let's be honest, a little bit more Spursy again. But you do have to say it's a little bit unfortunate with the injuries and the suspensions that they have had. It's going to be a tough ask for them to get anything against Manchester City. And in all honesty, the way that City are looking at the moment, I don't think they're going to either. So I'm going to go Man City 2, Spurs 0. Guys, that is the predictions for this one. As always, I'm going to bring up James's predictions on screen now and alongside mine. And if you have enjoyed the video, like I said earlier, please can you do me a favor, hit that like button. Please do subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done so already. And drop your predictions in the comments below, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one. Have a good week, or take care. Goodbye.